Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Emory Climate Talks. It is already March, and I just cannot believe how quickly this year is going, but 2021 continues to be a difficult year. I hope that you're all making the best out of what we have. My name is Eri Saikawa, and I'm an associate professor of environmental sciences at Emory University. This is our first official Climate Talks conversation in partnership with Emory Alumni Environmental Network, and I'm so glad to have you with us today. This webinar series is made possible by our anonymous donor that supports our trip to the UN climate change negotiations, and Emory Climate Talks is in partnership with the Department of Environmental Sciences and the Resilience and Sustainability Collaboratory at Emory University. I would not be here if the amazing Leah Thomas does not do everything behind the scenes and to tell me what I need to do. So thank you so much, Leah. I hope that many of you are regulars, but maybe some of you are joining us for the first time. Welcome, and I hope that you will continue coming. We have an exciting program ahead of us. For example, our next webinar is on March 16th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And we will be joined by Dr. Talia Mayo, an assistant professor in math at Emory University. Some people might have heard the most recent Amplifier episode with her as an interviewee. If you have not, please check it out. If you are not sure what Amplifier is about, that is a new podcast created for you by Emory's own COP alumni and students. As the name suggests, our aim is to raise voices against rising temperatures. The new episode will be coming out very soon as well, and we are in season 2. So I hope you subscribe to our YouTube channel, newsletter, and the podcast if you have not done it yet. We will post the information in the chat shortly. As usual, we are recording today's talk, and we will make it available to you in the next couple of days on the YouTube channel. For the recording purposes, we have muted your microphones. If you have any questions during the talk, please feel free to use the chat function to type up the questions so that we can raise them during the Q&A session. So today, I'm very excited to be co-hosting this webinar with Emory Alumni Environmental Network, or EAEN, and the co-leads of this, May Bowen and Taylor McNair, are both COP21 alums. We have two very special guests today as well. The first is Camilla Schramk, and she is my lab alumna, and I feel like I see her regularly, although only at COP. We also have Angela Jiang, who took my class, but I am bumping into her more often now on Zoom, and I'm observing her great work that she does for the community in Georgia. I can go on and on, but I'm too excited, as you can tell. I will stop here, and I will welcome May to introduce our speakers.
Hi, everyone. My name is May Bowen, and I'm an alum of Emory. I graduated in 2016, and I'm one of the co-leads of the Emory Alumni Environmental Network, which is an alumni group that you can join when you graduate to continue programming and working with the community on sustainability initiatives and thinking about green careers, which is what brings us here today. The Alumni Network wanted to partner with Emory Climate Talks to share the careers of two alumni who do organizing work in the climate change movement, both locally in Georgia and abroad in Europe, to give you a sense of the different ways that you can get involved in the movement if that's what you want to do with your career. So today we're talking to Camilla Schramk, who graduated in 2016 like me. She is a senior communications campaigner at the Sunrise Project, and she'll tell you more about their work. And we also have Angela Jiang, who graduated in 2019 from the college as well, who's a conservation organizer at the Georgia chapter of the Sierra Club. I will let them give you a lot more detail about their background. So go ahead and kick us off, Camilla.
Thank you, May and Eri, and hi, everyone. I am Camilla Schramek, and I am excited to talk to you all today. So thank you to both May and Eri for the invitation. I will kind of give you a mix of both what led to where I am today while I was at Emory and till now, and then I'll tell you a bit about what I do as well. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and I'll either get to them at the end or after Angela is done talking for a Q&A. So like I said, I'm Camilla Schramek. I went to Emory from 2012 to 2016, and I majored in both environmental science, and then I did a dual degree in math and political science. I now live in Copenhagen, Denmark. And like May said, I am a senior communications campaigner at the Sunrise Project. So I'll now tell you kind of a bit about how I ended up in Copenhagen, Denmark. Not Danish. I grew up in upstate New York, so definitely wasn't on my trajectory at the start. But yeah, my entrance into the climate movement doesn't really have any amazing story. I always knew that I wanted to work in environment and study environment, which is one of the reasons I chose Emory. And at Emory, I began my major in ENVS and was quickly part of the community. I was working in the department. I was one of Professor Sakawa's first students. And I kind of really knew that was my focus. But what led me into the climate space was a bit outside of Emory. So when I was a freshman, I was really inspired by Bill McKibben and his Do the Math tour, which was a tour about the college fossil fuel divestment campaigns that were taking place across the country. And at his talk, I learned about all the power I had as a student to start a similar campaign at Emory. So together with another one of my friends who was also at that talk, we started a campaign at Emory to push them to stop investing in fossil fuels. And that was really rewarding in the sense that it showed me what it was like to be a climate activist, kind of opened my eyes to the broader movement, and connected me with a community that was big at the time and now is much bigger. When I was a freshman at Emory, climate was a thing, but it wasn't like there was all these opportunities I was well aware of. In my bubble, it was still seen as kind of a radical career to choose. And so this opened my eyes to all the opportunities there were. Also, when I started the divestment campaign and connected to the community, it really opened me up to other opportunities as well. So my senior year, I helped organize Atlanta's Climate March, and I was also kind of connected to this nice community in Atlanta. So from kind of this interest at Emory, I knew I wanted to go into climate campaigning in some form, but I didn't know exactly what. And I did a lot of different internships and opportunities while I was at Emory. I did research in Aries Research Group, which like I said in the beginning, was majoring in math, and quickly learned that while I like math and I like research, it wasn't what I wanted to do as a career. What first started to open my eyes to communication and what that might look like in the climate movement was a fellowship I did at the Department of Energy. Going into my junior year, I filled out a kind of blank application form for any fellowship at Department of Energy, and they actually placed me in the communications department, and the fit was a good one. Also, what obviously shaped my life a lot more than I realized it would was my study abroad experience in Copenhagen. So my junior year, I actually petitioned through the study abroad office to study in Copenhagen because the program didn't exist yet at the time. And I was fascinated with the country's work in sustainable development and climate policy, and just, of course, wanted to study abroad. And fortunately, the program got approved, and I was the first Emory student to study in Copenhagen. And obviously came back again after Emory. I also, during my abroad experience, interned at the UN, which really opened my eyes to kind of another subset of the climate space, and is something I'm still very interested in. So coming back to Emory my senior year, I knew I wanted to go back to Europe or somewhere outside of the US, and I was really fortunate to receive a Fulbright research fellowship. So I got to come back to Denmark, and I did my master's in climate change here at the University of Copenhagen. And my research specifically focused on climate change communications. So by then I had started working, which I'll touch on in a second, and knew that the practical applications of climate change when it came to framing and messaging and in the media was something I was really interested in. And so that's what I pursued as research too, so that I could apply it to whatever I worked in after. As I knew by then I didn't want a career in research. So alongside my Fulbright fellowship, I was also working, like I said, and that work was at a global NGO called CARE International, which is a humanitarian and development NGO. is actually Ari, who gave me that first connection there. So you never know what your Atlanta connections might lead to. But their climate group was based in Copenhagen, and I started with just a student position my first year of my master's. And by the second year, I was hired at CARE as their head of climate change communications. And it was an amazing experience. I was able to have the experience to approach climate change from a humanitarian perspective. So really doing campaign work and advocacy work from the perspective of helping the most impacted, particularly in the global South. So a lot of travel to Africa, the Middle East, Asia, working on issues that overlapped often with climate, like gender, disaster risk, resilience, food and nutrition. It was a really amazing first job to have because the tasks were so broad and because it was such a big organization. As Ari mentioned, I had the great opportunity to lead comms for the organization at all COPs. So I was really involved in the UN system from the perspective of a nonprofit or a NGO, which is a non-governmental organization. And that was really informative. And then I also, did everything from leading social media to leading their work with media to co-authoring reports. Really, like when you think of comms, I did everything there, which was great as a first job. But after about 4 years, I was ready for something more focused. And that went back to the activist interests and roots that I had at Emory. And so this August, I started a new job as a senior communications campaigner at the Sunrise Project. And now I'll tell you a little bit about what the Sunrise Project is and what I do there now. So the Sunrise Project is an NGO, which I said before, it's kind of the term that's used in the space as a non-governmental organization, and nonprofit is what it's usually called in the US. But it started in Australia and now it's in Europe and North America. And our group is really driven by like the passion to solve the climate crisis. It's a team of mostly campaigners, researchers, communications professionals with the aim to scale social movements to drive the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. But what's so unique about Sunrise and why many of you probably haven't heard of it is because it's actually at our core that we don't want it to be about us. So our focus is about building the movement and addressing climate change, not about profiling the organization. We're lucky because of our funders that we don't need to actively fundraise. Often in the nonprofit sector, that's one of your main drivers, which is why branding is so important. But we're fortunate to be able to lift local voices and organizations over our own. And that's actually one of our main areas, is to re-grant our funds to other local organizations. So through a grants program, we provide partner groups basically what they need. And we have some staff in other areas that also provide the strategies and analysis and support to them. And through my role, I also work significantly with the partners that we re-grant to. We also do a lot around driving specific campaigns and movements. So the Sunrise Project's work is primarily focused on global finance and on our Australia work at the national level that's around coal mining and exports and the energy transformation. One of our biggest campaigns globally is called Stop Adani. It's around the proposed Adani Carmichael coal mine in Australia, which is potentially one of the biggest coal mines in the world. And our campaign is obviously, we don't want it to be built. And it's been a huge success. It's what started the organization and is still ongoing today, which is good because we haven't lost. We also, haven't fully won. So let's hope that campaign can end soon. To our benefit. And the last focus of our work, which is where I sit, is global finance. So I work specifically around private finance, pushing personally insurance, but our campaigns push everything from investors to asset managers to private banks to central banks to take their money out of fossil fuels. So our team is completely remote, based primarily in North America and Europe. And some of the examples of companies that I'm sure you've heard of that we have campaigns around are BlackRock, HSBC, the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank. And I'll tell you a bit more about the insurers in a second. But as many of you have probably noticed through everyday life, financial institutions in the private sector at large have started to preach this really big game about climate and being ambitious and green. but we're not seeing enough action. Some of them are following through, and some, like a lot of the private financial institutions, are not. And so our main aim is really just to remove that credibility gap and take the actions that are happening, also pushing for more actions and words to be followed by implementation, and to show that they're following through. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm one of the senior communications campaigners at Sunrise. I'm one of 4. We all focus in different thematic areas, and I focus on insurance. Our campaign is called Insure Our Future, and our aim is to get the world's biggest insurance companies to stop insuring and investing in fossil fuels. Some of you might ask why insurance, which is also a question I asked when I first started. But without insurance, basically fossil fuel projects can't happen. They are the ones who provide the cover for the risk that most new oil pipelines and coal plants and every fossil fuel project cannot be built without protecting that risk. So when the insurers pull out, a lot of the time the projects can't happen. So it's a really amazing lever to influence projects at a scale that's a bit more realistic than targeting the product itself sometimes, or at my organization targeting both at the same time. So as a result, the insurance industry has a ton of influence and pressure, and also hopefully pressure to put on pushing the transition, not just stopping fossil fuels as well. I'd like to give the caveat that there are a lot of people in the insurance industry that are decent and who get it and who want to leverage it. But not all, and oftentimes not the ones higher up, are necessarily driven by climate as their first aim. So even if they do claim to be passionate and have some initiatives, the bottom line always tends to take precedence, or movement tends to not happen at the pace that we demand. So what we're really pushing them to do is leverage their power to accelerate the transition in line with the IPCC's 1.5 degrees pathway. So basically, to prevent the global temperature from raising 1.5 degrees, there's specific aims we are putting on insurers. So as I mentioned, this campaign is really focused on the major insurers, and the past few years that it's been ongoing, it's actually been relatively successful, not just because of the campaign, but so far over 24 insurance companies have stopped investing or underwriting coal in some way. There's still a lot of improvement to be done. We do an annual scorecard at the company that we did in December that actually ranks global insurers and shows, who are the leaders and laggards. But our next really big push on the insurance industry and on private finance as a whole, for those who have moved on coal, is to now move on oil and gas. So to completely rule out financing new oil and gas projects and to phase out existing projects in line with that 1.5 degrees pathway. Some of our major targets you've probably heard of: Liberty Mutual in the US, Lloyd's of London in Europe, also, AIG, Swiss Re, Munich Re, AXA, all the big ones have a stake. And you might wonder why I didn't list your insurer. Some of the biggest ones we actually don't target because they're just not going to move as well. So we have to be realistic in our aims to some extent. For example, we don't target Chinese insurers because they're essentially nationalized and there's not much power we can have in that industry. Lastly, I'll wrap up with a bit of what I'm doing at Sunrise. So communications and campaigning are both in my role, and that is exactly what my focus is on. So for those who are familiar with the traditional comms position at a company, typically you would sit in a separate department, kind of away from everyone else, and just be focusing on social media, press releases, messaging, maybe newsletters. But my position is fully ingrained in the campaign teams. So I'm also an expert in the areas that we work in. And I'm fully involved in everything from community planning to strategic messaging to campaign efforts, and in all the calls with the technical experts as well as with the media. So I do everything from building and maintaining relationships with journalists, particularly in the financial space like Bloomberg and Financial Times, to implementing and developing communication strategies in line with our campaign strategies. So taking that messaging we might be aiming at an insurer or at a regulator to a way that's easily understood and digestible, helping plan major actions and events. So we often, even now, still do protests and staged actions outside of insurance headquarters. We did one yesterday in the US outside of AIG, actually, and we'll do them in London as well. During lockdown, of course, we get a little creative with hand sanitizer and masks, but we're still there when we can be. And yeah, online, we've also gotten quite creative with the actions we do, like calendar jamming insurers. So we have hundreds of people send an invite for over a week, and then that person's calendar is flooded with events that they don't actually plan to attend, saying act on climate or something along those lines. So getting creative, just as everyone's had to in these times, to continue putting that pressure on. And yeah, I'll stop there. I haven't been keeping an eye on the chat. Okay, looks like there's been some nice link sharing. Thank you. And I will now hand over to Angela.
Awesome. Full disclosure, I'm also part of the audience. I was also here to hear from Camilla, and I'm so glad I did. I learned a lot, so thanks for that. Great start. Hey y'all, my name is Angela Jiang, use she, hers pronouns. It's so good to be in community with y'all and to be back with Emory folks. It's so refreshing. I'm gonna take a step back and just kind of give a little bit of general life background. I think it's really, I don't know, I think it's important to kind of just know some roots. And I'm a Georgian peach through and through, born and raised all my life in Metro Atlanta. As you can see, I didn't go too far from the peach tree. I'm still here in North Atlanta. I live now together here with my partner. I'm a second generation immigrant. My parents are of Taiwanese and Singaporean background, and I hold that heritage really closely to me when I do my organizing and my work, and I guess even more so together with a lot of social justice movements that are gaining a lot of steam. And I guess, I want to just first preface and say that I first came to Emory actually on a business school scholarship. So I was, I guess some people may think of it, I was going to be a business school major. And basically, it was a really tough decision for me because I came at Emory with the specific scholarship. And as I was taking more classes as a business school major, as I was exploring more of the campus and just figuring out all these other majors that people were having, and I don't know, I guess I was not intellectually satisfied with the path that I was kind of almost destined to go embark upon when I first came to Emory. And so in my sophomore year, I had switched around a lot of different double majors, just trying to figure out, how can I balance the business school with potentially doing something in the college. I made the formal decision to actually cut off from the business school and transition my scholarship to the Emory Scholars Program and not to pursue a business school, I guess, career within Emory. And it was a great decision. My mother was not very happy with me. I was dating my boyfriend at the time, and I think she was ready to kill him because she might have thought that he was the reason why I might have switched to this new major. But it was tough. I mean, I guess if anyone here is like a second-gen immigrant or, has a family that really cares a lot about your academic background, as Camilla mentioned, it was a risk, even though I, still graduated in 2019, and I'm sure it still is for some of y'all, so I really empathize with that. And so why that switch, right? I guess growing up, my mother conserved or had a lot of sustainable practices in my household, more for economic reasons. But one example is, she would collect water in tubs outside on our deck to use to water our plants, wash dishes sometimes. We kept the thermostat really low or during the winter and summer seasons and everything. My sister went to Emory and also had a great experience with environmental science background. So I guess all these family experiences culminated with, I went on like a sustainability tour when I first came to campus of Taylor Spicer, really gave me this strong yearning to join a community of folks who were pursuing an intellectual or academic career beyond a career itself. That there was like a higher cause to kind of what you were studying at your time at Emory. And I really desired that. And I just wasn't feeling like I could make that connection when I first came to the business school. And so I joined the environmental sciences department, and it was a fantastic choice, honestly. I really want to talk about internships, and just mention that I guess as an Emory experience, and I guess reflecting back, I was not very tied to campus organizing. I think I spent a lot of my extracurricular time, a lot of my internships off campus. And I think that shaped and formed a lot of my connection and value in community organizing, and really wanting to see that the work that I did had strong connections with real communities off campus. And not to say that, I mean, there's so many fantastic opportunities on campus, but just to preface that I guess that was what I was looking for. And so my first internship was through the Ethics and Servant Leadership Program. Highly recommend it for anyone who might be looking to get an internship, but wants to have not just a stipend, because some internships out there are still unpaid, which is crazy and terrible. But that's a great program to look towards. They connect you with specific organizations. And I worked that summer with Park Pride. It's a local parks and green space advocacy nonprofit in Atlanta. It is just like, if anyone's watched Parks and Rec, it's kind of like that work. That's kind of what it's like to work with so many different community groups. But my internship was basically very focused on community building. And it just set up a trajectory there. It was the year of the Atlanta mayoral elections as well, in 2017, when I had that internship. So it was a really great connection of figuring out, what communities are really doing the real work of building green space advocacy in the city, because it's not just always about government leaders and nonprofits. At the end of the day, there are real citizens and people who are caring about their neighborhoods who do a lot of this work at the end of the day. And coupled that with the elections, I think also rooted my interest in more political work and advocacy, and knowing and being really interested in really nitty-gritty local politics. So that was my first internship. My second internship was with the Emory Scholars Program. I interned with the City of Atlanta District 2 with City Councilman Amir Faroqi. I was a policy intern. Did a lot of policy research day after day. I did get a chance to sit on some neighborhood association meetings, but I mentioned this to say that I figure out certain aspects of the work that I liked. I love working with the councilman. I kind of restored my faith in politics a little bit, but I knew I didn't want to sit in on a desk job just doing policy research all the time. I really missed the connection to communities that I had experienced in Park Pride the year prior. And I knew I wanted to go towards something that had a bit of a better balance. So again, as you're going towards internships, and even, if it's something that you may even think that you really want to do, it's even just as much important right now to think about figuring out what you really don't want to do and what you do want to do. I think people really focus on what they do want to do without seeing the benefits of how low risk it can be right now to figuring out the aspects of the work and the kind of community activism that you want to do that you actually totally don't like. And that was something a piece I figured out at the City of Atlanta that year. The next year, I did a lot of internships. In my senior year, I interned with two organizations. During the year, I actually interned with the Emory Planning, Design, Construction Department here on campus. They might be having internships, so I'm not super sure. But basically, it had to do with green building and all the design and planning of all the buildings on campus. And I went that way because I was like, oh, green building might be something I might be interested in pursuing. I was interested in the technical aspects of green building. As you can see, I was trying to figure out a lot of things during my undergrad year. So I was just really trying out a lot of things. And again, with that internship, I figured out green buildings is still not the thing I wanted to go towards. The technical aspects were interesting, but not enough that I would pursue something higher with that. And so that was, again, another great learning experience through an internship. And lastly, I just want to mention my last internship was with Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta. So just complete pivot at that point. It wasn't climate work anymore. It was immigration justice and immigration rights. this was me trying to go back to my roots and really trying to start thinking about intersectionalities between my heritage and my identity and climate, if there was an opportunity for that. And it ended up being an internship experience that, as I was frantically going in my job search in senior year, transitioned into a full-time job. And I really want to assert for those of you who are seniors out there, please don't be burdened or overburdened with the pressures of trying to find a job by a certain time. I know there's some folks who get jobs in the fall semester of their senior year. That's immense pressure. A lot of those jobs are very highly resourced. They tend to be consulting jobs that have literal cycles of hiring people. This is not the way it works in the nonprofit and government space. We hire on a basis where we have needs, where we have the resources. So it is silly, and do not overstress yourself with trying to get a job by a certain period of time, because it will just not help you and leave you really stagnated. And I remember feeling really pressured during that time. And I guess looking back and with some more that I will share, I'll kind of shine light on why that actually ended up working out, that I kind of waited to find my full-time job at that point. But yeah, I guess turning towards extracurriculars, kind of underlining all these internship experiences. I tried a lot of different things. I helped co-organize a sustainable food fair. I think that really showed me how much I loved connecting and finding nexuses within different organizations on campus and bringing everyone together for a shared purpose. Specifically, of course, with sustainable food, but bringing back the joy within the work, because sometimes it's really hard and tough to fight against fossil fuel interests or some of these big companies and everything. But the sustainable food fair was something I think that helped ingrain in me a pillar of finding joy within the work and really appreciating the community coming together for a shared purpose. I also, was with ECAS. I was the former president of Emory, I guess the full acronym, Emory Climate Analysis and Solutions Team. It was a baby back then, so it's not saying much that I was the president. I just really stuck with it throughout the years. But one of the projects that I really loved with ECAS, and I guess kind of tying back to connections with local community, is we did a project called Empower, in which we partnered with local businesses and coached students in local Atlanta public schools to learn how to build energy efficiency measures, know how to recognize, how to incorporate more energy efficiency into buildings, and to actually make those changes in the school itself, in the students' homes themselves, or in the businesses themselves. That couldn't have been possible without the OSI grants. If you have a cool project, I think they're still going on. That's a great opportunity to just pursue something that, it's great to learn from and can have a real community benefit. But I used an OSI grant together with an organization that hadn't had any funding, wasn't chartered or anything, to actually make something happen within that point. So I really, again, there are resources out there on campus. I'm sure you all are very bright and know about them, but if you don't, it's just great to pursue, to try and support the ambitions and the projects that you want to pursue during campus. And I guess going back to just 2 years ago, and I can't believe that. So I graduated in 2019. I got my call for the job at Asian Americans Advancing Justice. Again, like I mentioned, that was an internship. It turned into a full-time community organizer position then. Literally right as I was headed to the airport to go on my grad trip. I was going back to Asia to see my family with my partner, and I was on the way to the airport and I got a call, and that was literally when I got the job. Until then, I had not had a full-time job lined up, and it was stressful, of course. But I'm just saying that to say that life works that way. It is fortuitous. You never know when things are going to work out, and at least that's how it worked out for me during that time. And I was in a period of uncertainty, and it's really difficult, but putting yourself out there as much as possible was really important. And I really couldn't have gone there without mentorships and without mentors. I was really lucky during my internships, during all those that I mentioned, that I didn't, go up to my boss in those internships and be like, hey, are you going to mentor me? Like, will you be my mentor? It's such an awkward question to ask, right? I was able to really just connect with them afterwards and just kept talking with them, texting them. And eventually we our relationship, or my relationship with my supervisors, developed into a natural mentorship. But I think, it's so important to have mentors because with my current job at the Sierra Club, I really don't think I could have gone there without my mentor from the city of Atlanta looking out for me and connecting me with a former Sierra Club chapter director, to basically have some coffee and then to know that there was a position that wasn't even listed on a website to then apply for the Sierra Club. So as much as possible, I think if there's a person that you're really connecting with, even in an extracurricular on campus right now as a professor, or in your job if you have an internship, you don't have to be awkward and say, oh, will you be my mentor? And, put it that way. But you can say that you value mentorship. You think it's really important, and ask if, you're willing to continue the conversation relationship after whatever role you have with that person. I think that's a bit more of a natural way to go into mentorship. Because as I will say, as the more I work, the more I realize it is not a common conversation to have about mentorship. And I think the most I had about that was in my undergraduate years. And so I really encourage that mindset of seeking that out as you're going forward and you're working with different people. So anyways, going back, I know I'm a little all over the place, but I got that job. I went on my little grad trip, and then I came back in that summer, late in 2019, to that job. I enjoyed my internship a lot with this organization. And again, I'm going to preface all this to say that, this is not a reflection. This is my own personal opinion, and I'm just sharing earnestly with you my experience. But my internship was very different from my full-time job at this organization. I had a different supervisor. I had to work with a different team. And I guess from internship into a full-time role, as an intern, you sometimes might be shielded from the full office dynamics or organizational culture of whatever nonprofit or organization you might be working for. And when I transitioned to my full-time job, it was really tough. I love my coworkers. I had interns to work with, and they gave me a lot of joy. I think they held up the job for me day to day. I could see, you can see yourself as a new graduate in folks that are interning, and I knew their experience, but the truth was I was working so many hours. I was working 50 plus hours a week. Weekends were pretty much starting to become non-existent for me. Really high pressure environment. And it just, frankly, it was a toxic work culture. And it was really hard because, it's your first job coming out of college. You want it to work out, right? You've worked so hard to find a job and to find the right opportunity. And for me, in my experience, it was not a healthy working environment, and I felt really trapped. And so I tried to stick it out. That was a great point in which I, connected with my family. I connected with my mentors. Again, that value of a mentorship. And everyone besides myself was telling me that it was not the place I should remain at and I should leave. If you can think about, again, all the pressures of trying to make things work out, it's your last job, it's your first job, and you don't even know what's next for you. Getting that advice from everyone else in your community and your network is really tough. But I did make the decision. It did take me a while. I took a few months to eventually muster up the courage to do this, I guess, if you can call it courage. But I chose to leave the job with nothing else to jump off to right after that. I was completely taking a risk and getting straight into unemployment. And so happened very quickly. It was just at the end of 2019, I had made the decision. And I was really lucky because I was connected with my larger community at that point. And with my mentor's help, with the help of a few of actually some of my Emory friends who had been in other jobs at that point, I managed to find a part-time organizing job with New American Pathways. And that helped me kind of finally take a break from an environment that I was just really overworked in and needed to kind of heal from, and also be able to get some income on the side and be able to build on some organizing skills that I had already worked for. And reconnected with my mentors. It's not an easy thing to do when you're just kind of like at your rock bottom and you're just like, oh my God, what's next? And really grateful for my family and community. And that coffee chat happened with my mentor helping me to connect to the former director of the Georgia Sierra Club. I learned about that job I was telling y'all that wasn't listed on the website or anything. I applied, I interviewed, and I somehow got that job. I really didn't think it was going to pan out. I thought that was going to be the first thing out of a bunch of new job searches that I didn't think was going to happen for me, and it did. And so I say all that to say, going back to the pressure of, trying to find a job within their senior year, I would not have known that, the Georgia Sierra Club was not going to be ready to hire someone until December of 2019. So literally 6 months after I graduated. And it's literally been the best working environment for me right now. It's the complete opposite of what I experienced in my first college job. My hours are much healthier right now. We actually literally have restrictions on the number of hours we have per week until we have to get paid overtime. I'm now part of a union, and I'm part of a larger network of many more mentors and support and resources that I could not have gotten in my first college job. And so I say all that to say that I was really privileged to be able to just go straight into unemployment right after my first job. I know everyone can't risk that without having something to move on to. And I really want to recognize the privilege that I had in that if it hadn't been for support my family and friends. But again, don't bank everything on your first job. At least in my experience, the second job that came up very quickly for me after graduating from Emory ended up being the best decision I could have made. And I'm very happy in my career now. So, Sierra Club. All right. So we are the largest environmental advocacy nonprofit. We're the oldest organization in the US. By largest, I mean number of members and supporters. We have dues-paying members, and we have a ton of volunteers everywhere in the country. Oldest comes with its pros and cons. We have very easy name recognition. We have a lot of resource. We're a very well-resourced organization, but we come with baggage. We were founded by John Muir, who does have white supremacist tendencies. We haven't always done things right in all communities. And, like other very large green nonprofits, we don't always have a great history with poor working class communities of color. Of course, we're trying to rectify that. But I just want to say that, because every nonprofit has its pros and cons. I mentioned that it's a much healthier working environment for me, but these are kind of some of the cons of its outward facing, view to the community in the communities that we work with. But I am a conservation organizer. I don't like the name. I guess what's more accurate is I am a community organizer specifically for focus on legislative advocacy and political advocacy. So I guess a political organizer is more accurate. And I help oversee and plan all our political campaigns. So this year we're going to be focused on City of Atlanta elections. Last year we were focused on the Senate races, of course, and everything going on in 2020. Still haven't gotten a real vacation, but it's all right. We'll need to get a vacation soon. And I oversee our legislative session. So right now we are in legislative session. That's when the state house in Georgia passes a bunch of bills. Unfortunately, yesterday, House Bill 531 was passed, which is a major, major threat to voting rights. It is a 66-page bill that every line is all about trying to take away folks' right to vote or to make it harder to vote. I can post more information later, but it's new. But basically, I wear a lot of hats. My chapter is really small. It's really 5 people in my organization, 5 staff members. We have volunteer leaders. We're a volunteer-centric organization. So the chair of our volunteer executive committee can fire or hire my executive director. So we're a little bit of a weirdly structured organization that way, in which volunteers have a lot of power. But they're also our people power, and they're our biggest value add as an organization. And I also work on advancing a lot of what Camilla does, 100% clean energy. And so that campaign is called Ready for 100, which envisions a clean energy future, a fully transition to clean energy, both in transportation and your buildings by 2050. And we have 170 plus committed cities and towns to this vision. We have 60 plus active campaigns. So that's a lot of people and campaigns, but right now, frankly, we're focused on trying to implement these commitments. We've learned that it's one thing to have resolutions to say one thing, and it's another thing to actually do the thing and transition to 100% clean energy. And that's what we're focused on right now. We're trying to focus on how do we get funding to pay for clean energy plans? How do we prioritize Black and Brown voices in this work who've organized all their lives to speak for themselves and fight against environmental racism? And how can we do this in a way as a predominantly white, well-resourced organization? We are not the major voices in this work. We are supporting and uplifting already existing work that's led by poor folks, working class folks, and communities of color. So very happy in my job. I think we should go, of course, I'm happy to get more in depth in the questions and answers, but I hope that's helpful, and I'm really glad that you all are here, and I'm so happy to connect if that's helpful beyond this call for anything else you might need.
Thanks, Camilla and Angela. We are happy to take questions. If you want to just leave them in the chat, I'll ask them. And we've got about 11 minutes or so left, so that'll give us some good time to get to your questions. And if you don't type questions in the chat, Ari and I will make some up, but I feel like they won't be quite as good as all of yours. All right, so we have a question from Lauren. She's asking Camilla, do you have any advice for someone interested in doing climate-related work internationally?
Thanks, Lauren. It really depends on what you want to do and where you want to do it. But yeah, there's a ton of opportunities. So let's say you wanted to do it in Europe. I think a lot of the time to have maybe like either a connection in the US that you can make to that country. Like, for example, at CARE, my connection was through Erie in Atlanta, and then they had a team in Denmark, or through studies. And then the last one is through a lot of bigger climate groups like 350 or Greenpeace. They'll have positions that are kind of temporary or internship level, or maybe entry level, that are meant to kind of be open to everyone. So like, for example, when I was working at CARE, we had a lot of positions in the field. So let's say you wanted to do something at one of our country offices, which were in like 90 countries. Those positions were for anyone around the world. We weren't often hiring within that country. We were actually purposefully hiring people abroad. I will give the caveat that it's difficult with visas, but if you want to do it, I think it's wholly possible. And yeah, you just need that kind of first foot in the door. Through like masters are the easiest way to do it, but if you don't want to study through other connections or through positions that are more open to hiring outside the country.
And our next question asks both panelists for your best advice for those looking for a remote job in the sustainability field. It's a very 2020 question.
I can go. So my job is fully remote. And I actually say that I'm biased because I'm in an international space, but almost all the jobs I see are remote. Before Corona, maybe it was like 60% were remote or had the option of being remote. So it's more now, but I would say if you're willing and wanting to be remote, you have more opportunities, not less. Obviously, time zones can be a challenge when you're working remotely. I'm often working really late days to get all my calls in and working with California, and then really early days with Australia. So often if you're working remotely, it's for a reason, because it's international or because it's with a wide range of people in different places. But I would say my experience is, even if the position isn't remote, sometimes the companies are still open to hiring you remotely. So don't think of that as a barrier, I would say, and propose it in the interview.
Yeah, and I just quickly jump in and say that remote jobs are growing at the Sierra Club, for instance. And I think I didn't know my job even existed when I was in college, and now there's new jobs being created to support remote positions. And I think organizations are incentivized to do that. So, for instance, digital organizers are becoming really popular, or distributed organizers. And so, yeah, again, I would say actually remote work is growing, and the pandemic might actually be helping to grow that trajectory more forward.
Our next question is for Camilla. Could you talk more about the day-to-day aspect of your job and what differences you might see between the global and the national platform?
Sure. So day to day, I'm doing a lot of reactive work. So like I said, I'm working in private finance. So a lot of our work is to either push companies to drop coal, drop oil and gas, drop tar sands, or to strengthen existing policies already around that. So day to day, I might, I don't know, start by sending a quote that I've written with our campaigner to The Guardian, and then from there having I don't know, 3-hour meeting with partners to strategize around the next major shareholder meeting the next month, and then follow that up with comments and planning around a next major report launch, and end it with plans for an action online with 100 people globally. So, I mean, this is just me making stuff up, but a day to day might look like that quite a bit. And the main differences between kind of, and I'm going to generalize this a bit, between global and national work are that on the national level, and again, this is generalized, you can be a lot more granular and specific in what you do. And a lot of the time, the wins are a bit more tangible. So you can say, we want to achieve blank within blank days and blank. Whereas in international, the sheer focus is everywhere, and that's really exciting. But the wins are harder to define. So like, we want everything to be in line with the 1.5C pathway, right? Like that's kind of a hard thing to measure. But you have that kind of, I don't know, amazing experience of working with everyone. So it depends what you feel the strongest connection to. I wanted something international because that's where I am the most fulfilled, but I have a lot of peers that I know are a lot more fulfilled working on the grassroots level.
Our next question is from Ben. You both have really interesting education and career paths. What's the biggest piece of advice for those of us trying to figure out our paths during and after graduation?
That's a great question. And I guess, like, just to respond to that, Leah Thomas is in this room, but one thing I was thinking of doing before I decided to just go full into the career space, I know a lot of people think about masters right after. I was thinking about doing a 4+1 program at Emory. And I was talking through and through, trying to figure out like some thesis for myself, and knowing, I kind of emphasized I was a very off-campus, extracurricular oriented person. I was trying to pursue something that required a thesis or something. And Leah Thomas literally told me, she was like, I don't think this master's program is for you. I don't think you should do this. And I really appreciate her candor, because I realized I was trying to pursue something, or pursue, I guess, like a graduate degree or graduate school, basically, for reasons other than anything that really fit or aligned with not just my interests, but my actual skills, what I was good at, what I had dedicated all my life and time at Emory to do. And so I think I really don't want to underemphasize like the amount of peer pressure there might be to have so many different options and paths. And it might sound cheesy, but really think about why you're making the decisions, or why you're considering certain pathways. Be really explicit about, are those pressures external, or are those pressures because of your own volition? I think that can serve as a really good compass when trying to figure out so many distinct career paths, so many ways to go about going post-grad and everything like that, that best actually aligns for your own interests, your own skills, and your own passions.
For me, I think what's defined my success like during and post Emory the most is that I've created the opportunities when they weren't necessarily right in front of me. So I think a lot of the time people want to fit within these standard pathways they see, like, you know, the traditional business pathway or the traditional law school pathway or the traditional medical school pathway. And those are great for some people and fit them perfectly. But for people like me, I never felt like there was any pathway that was what I wanted. And I wanted climate and I wanted international and I wanted these things that I didn't feel were like readily available. And so I really like wasn't shy about pushing for them, like creating a new study abroad program or showing up at Aries' front door her first day at Emory and saying, hey, I want to do blank research with you. Or when I studied abroad in Denmark, just emailing and reaching out actively to the UN and saying, I'm willing to do an unpaid internship. Do you have any projects I could be of help on? And honestly, even when you're looking for full-time positions, I wouldn't narrow your searches to companies that are actively employing. I think a lot of the time, if you have a, you know, compelling email or interest, it can open doorways that weren't necessarily open for everyone. I mean, Angela mentioned she got the job at Sierra Club because she had that connection. And that certainly was the case for me at CARE as well, because I was diligent and really just kind of pushing and trying to carve my way into the space that felt right for me.
So we've got 2 more questions in the chat, and I think we can hit both of them before we need to wrap up. So the first is, what can older alumni do to help younger alumni working in this space?
So I don't know what you exactly define by older alumni. So I'm
It's
just
not you,
gonna,
Camilla. I think we're talking decades older, probably.
okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and actually maybe something May can touch on as well, because she's definitely doing more of it than I am. But I would say a lot of alumni, similar to Angela and I, start their first position, and it's great at first, but then quickly maybe find themselves in a rut, or that it's not exactly the right fit, but also find it challenging, especially with that kind of first big career, to transition. I really found this a very similar experience to Angela's when I was leaving CARE. And so in particular, I would say kind of offering that advice to the younger alumni on their first or second career moves into new careers, and maybe shedding light depending on their experience. But if they've had similar experiences, that, you know, it took them however many steps to find where they are today, and steps they took that worked best for them.
Yeah, I think this is a great question too, and I'm glad, Camilla, you kind of like helped define like what does older alumni mean. And this is something I guess I've been thinking a lot about when I think about mentorship, and especially I guess like now on a not on a scale of like us being the mentors, I guess now still being mentored as a emerging or still pretty early on career professional. Um, yeah, and I guess like some advice, you know, mix of advice I've gotten. I had a really alluring, I guess, job opportunity to move on from the Sierra Club. And I asked for some advice from 2 different mentors. And one mentor was really focused on really just job progression and about how, like, the allure of the career and how it was a great opportunity in the space. And one mentor was a bit more holistic in the view about understanding I wanted to support my family that you know they're separating right now, and like I was really happy in my current job. What were the trade-offs? And so I guess like as life goes on, there's more factors to consider than more than just your career at some point. And I guess for folks who have gone through that, I think that candor is really appreciated in career advancement and knowing how to balance that, because that's something I always wondered when I was like working with a city councilman. I was like, how are you balancing like being married and like your wife being happy and actually like having a social life and things like that? I think the candor is going to be really appreciated and considered, and not just speaking on purely professional terms every time you know there's a relationship between alumni.
Thanks. That Camilla made a good point that, you know, in the EAEN space, you know, part of what we're trying to do is make some of those connections. And at least for us, it's been harder over time. We slowly meet new people and sort of add to our ranks folks that are sort of diverse in age. But we started as an organization of basically 3 folks who had just graduated from Emory and wanted to keep doing stuff like we'd done on campus and keep building our community. And so our network was similarly our age. And now that's getting to be a few years out from college, but I maintain that Camilla and I are both not old. But it still means that we're in that fun middle ground that Angela was talking about, where we both can mentor, especially current students. We have advice to give, but we also still need mentoring ourselves. And there's a lot of career ahead of us that we want to hear advice on and hear candidate advice on. So that was an awesome question from James. So one last question, if, yes, Caitlin's still here, so I'll go ahead and ask it. To both of you, she's currently an MPH student with a focus on health policy. And so did either of you have any insight on where environmental policy might be growing or different career paths in that specific field?
Well, health policy is quite broad, so I'll do my best to answer your question given that. But I mean, I think it's a huge, it's only growing, I would say right now. I'm going to talk not from a US perspective as much. So Angela, feel free to jump in. I think it's a different answer, maybe depending on the US administration at the time. But at least internationally, I would say that right now, every country is actively trying to submit and strengthen their first national climate plans. And so there's a ton to do at the international and national level. Within health, I mean, the pandemic we're in, I think, is quite reflective of the kind of increasing connection we're going to see between health and environmental policy, everything from epidemiology to the impacts of increased air pollution and emissions on health to a lot of things that Ari can probably answer in way better terminology than I could. But I've seen a lot of that at the international space. And for example, when I was at CARE, again, I don't know what type of health you're in, but a lot of our work increasingly on climate started to overlap with issues like sexual and reproductive health and things like the spread of diseases like Ebola or like, Ebola was at the time what it was, but now it'd probably be COVID, and how that impacts those who are already the most vulnerable to climate change. So I think you're in a really growing career path, which isn't great for the world, but is great for your career opportunities.
No, I mean, Camilla, you're right. I mean, I could say that the local and state level, a little bit of national level, that yes, policy is growing, but it's going in so many different directions. You know, it's definitely not only just when I did my policy fellowship, just cranking out and reading best practices from other organizations and cities. It's innovation, and it's, you know, trying to actually, when there's buzzwords in the media, for instance, it's like, okay, we got a clean energy transition or Green New Deal or just transition. We need people that actually define what the policy targets are for that, what the policy solutions look like. I frankly feel like there's a really great need for not just policy innovators, but policy advocates and people who can communicate really loaded jargony language that, you know, it might be tied up in the state legislature or in the law, and actually be able to democratize that to people and bring in advocates to actually set that policy rolling forward with real grassroots community support. And so I guess there's like, just to broaden a bit of what policy work can look like, and I know I'm coming from a very strong organizing perspective, but even more so, I think organizations are wanting to supplement organizing and community outreach with smart policy, because otherwise it's not strategic work to just be organizing without a clear policy target. And so I'd really stress and say that, I guess, in our organization or in spaces that I'm in, people are really looking for people who can break down policy and communicate that effectively in layman terms, and people who are innovators and know how to break beyond the just synthesizing policy and actually using that information to create new policy goals and initiatives.
Awesome. Well, that was all of our questions. So this is a good time to wrap up. I put some more information in the chat box about EAEN and our upcoming events. So everyone's welcome to look out for those and join us for something in the future. Thanks so much, Angela and Camilla, for joining us today and telling us all about your lives.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.